Okay, so now we'd like to invite all of our speakers back to the stage for a question and answer session.
Okay, Paolo, what is the most difficult operation you have ever performed?
Well, there are some challenging operations that sometimes we do. Probably the most challenging one is when we separate conjoined twins. Not just because the surgery itself is difficult, but it's a bit unpredictable. So sometimes children are born together. So instead of being separated, like normal twins, they are born with some joining part of the body together. So sometimes it's the liver, sometimes it's part of the intestine, they can be all together, also the bladder. And we have to do an operation to try to separate them. And it's quite complex because it involves different teams and we cannot be absolutely sure what we are about to find when we separate. So probably conjoined twins is the answer.
And I have to say there aren't that many research jobs out there, so if you go and get a PhD, most students go off and do something else. There's loads of jobs. You can work in science communication, you can work in science publishing, you can become a patent lawyer who specializes in science, you can become a science teacher, you can do public engagement. There's all sorts of great jobs. And it's good just to know about science, even if you don't become a scientist. It's good to be a good citizen of the world, to have this knowledge, and have these critical thinking skills, which are quite transferable to other careers.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Thank you very much, Jenny. Okay, so now one for Lola. So what might stop a child getting the cataract surgery? What may not make them suitable for the surgery?
So if we take a global overview about what might make a child not get the cataract surgery, well, there's a global shortage of paediatric eye surgeons. So, for example, there are countries in sub-Saharan Africa where for the whole country there's a handful, there's fewer than 5 trained paediatric cataract surgeons who can do that kind of work. So accessibility to healthcare is a message you'll hear over and over again from population-based researchers who know what's going on in those fields.
And this one's for Paolo. Are there any alternative animals, aside from pigs, you could use for patients who have religious concerns?
Yeah. That's a very important question. Yes, there are. And the most one of the most used in terms of organ similar is the cow, for example. But the question is also open up the possibility to discuss a bit more, because we have talked to representatives of different religions, of course. And actually, when you take out the cells, there's no really element of the animal there, so there's no DNA. So, for example, something many people don't know, but they're already heart valve. They are being planted in human or any kind of religions that are through a process that take out all the DNA present. So it's actually, you're not transplanting anything in reality from the animals, because the collagen and the protein are very, established among different species. So there's no religion problem or cultural problem there. Because it's already in clinical practice, for example, for the valve.
Thank you, Paolo. I've got one that, there was one that was asked, which I think is suitable for all three of you to answer. And it is, if you wouldn't mind, if there is any one thing that any of you would change so far in the journey you've had to the position you're in now. Maybe if we start with you, Jenny.
That's a really tough question. I think if I did it all again, I'd probably go to medical school, become a doctor, and then become a clinician scientist, because I've noticed in my field that it gives you a tremendous advantage in doing research if you have that PhD and the MBBS. So I think I would have done that. Who knows if I would have survived medical school, but that's what I think I would have done.
I think it also gives your bank balance a big advantage as well.
So I came to ophthalmology late. In medical school I was interested in vision, but I thought I was going to be a neurologist, so looking at neurological disorders and how that affected vision. But then I realised that neurology was all about headaches and back pain. So I did A&E for a year after I left medical school to try and figure out what I wanted to be, because in accident emergencies, an A&E doctor, you see all the different specialities, and I realised through that I wanted to do eyes, and maybe I'd have identified eyes. I'd have linked eyes and vision sooner in medical school. But again, being an A&E for a year gave me some cool dinner party stories. So.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because I feel very lucky that I can combine surgery and science. And I learned that while I was training in Boston for 3 years, and that was quite late in my career. So in Europe and in UK, many surgeons don't spend enough time in the lab, and I think this is a limitation that we still have in Europe. So I learned that quite late. If I would have learned it a bit earlier, it would have been better. That's common practice, for example, in the States.
I've got a question for Jenny, which I think is quite a good question generally. Why doesn't penicillin fight viruses? Does it not recognise them like it recognises bacteria?
So different antibiotics target different processes, but the one thing they have in common is they all target metabolic pathways or cell walls that are specific to bacteria. So penicillin targets something that's in this peptidoglycan wall that viruses don't have. So to make a good antibiotic, you have to be specific against bacteria.
And one for Paolo. How long did it take you to train to be where you are now?
Did I finish training? I don't know. It's training is a long process, and so for me, I did medical school in Italy. This is 6 years, and then I did my training in Italy, in Amsterdam for a year, and then in Boston for 3 years. So it's about 9 years of training, and I did a PhD of other 3 years, so 12 plus 6. You make the account, but it's a long process. But it doesn't really matter because you learn while you're training, but you also practice your job. So it's not really that you study, or it's like now that you have to do exams and so on. Yeah, sometimes you have exams, but actually you already practice in the thing that you want to do for your life. So it doesn't really matter if you call it training or you call it job.
And the question is it possible to get a very high income job with science? What would you define as very high? 6 figures. 6 figures. Right. Okay. So I can just answer that one though. If you go and do clinical sciences, you can sort of like build quite a few different streams of income, right? This is my understanding. Maybe one of you can answer this.
Yeah, but also if you are a scientist and you get to patent something that everybody uses, then it's another stream of really get a good life. I think there's been demonstration that medical doctors certainly more because they have a secure job stream through their medical practice. However, try to be driven by passion because, for example, if you're a medical doctor, you can spend your time doing private practice, but you have much less fun. I can tell you, you earn much more money, but you have much less fun. So at this age in particular, try to be driven by passion. Then, of course, money are important, but I can assure that none of us has problem to survive. So you can make a good life after science, and actually, it gets better and better with time. I think science is one of those fields where people get paid more than others, and will be more. And in other countries, even more clear the difference, like in North America. But even here in UK, I think science is more and more recognized as a high-skilled job. So,
I think. Oh, did you want to add anything to that, Lola? No. Okay, so I think Paolo's advice there to sort of make your decisions based on passion is very true, and it's a very nice place to wrap things up, I think. So if we could all just give the speakers another round of applause, as well deserved.